Zooey Mama. I'm here today to talk about possibly the most annoying card that could take over the meta. We're talking about White Widow, who comes out in Spotlights on April 23rd. Now, White Widow is a 2-cost, 2-powered card with the on-reveal ability to add a Widow's Kiss to your opponent's side of her location. And the Widow's Kiss is a 0/0, but it has an ongoing effect for your opponent that this card has -4 power. Disable this ability if your side of this location is full. Okay, so just to add clarification, Widow's Kiss is your opponent's card. Once you put on their location, it's theirs. The ongoing effect is for them. So when it says disable this ability if your side of this location is full, it means if your opponent's side of the location is full, if you're the one who played White Widow. So you play on her location, she has the Widow's Kiss. In order for your opponent to negate the -4 power and just make Widow's Kiss a 0/0, they're going to have to turn off the ongoing with like Enchantress, or they're going to have to play 3 other cards there to fill it. Now, I'm going to go over some deck ideas for White Widow, the good, the bad, and the ugly for her. Go over the Spotlight Cash Week, and then just give my final thoughts and ratings for her. So let's get into it. White Widow synergizes with a few different archetypes right off the bat. First up, Clog. Okay, if you're playing like full Clog with goblins, if you're just playing debris, this is good because White Widow is adding a card to your opponent's side of the board. Even if they do fill up that location to make it 0 power, you're still just like adding a rock. Okay, so you could do White Widow into debris, just more rocks on your opponent's side than before. Next up, something like Nebula. Okay, this can be very strong because you could put Nebula in one lane, so your opponent wants to play cards there. But then you play White Widow in a different lane and they want to play cards on the Widow's Kiss. Do they choose between them? You know, this could even work with like Jean Grey where you force them to play in a third lane. That could have some real feat to it. And then we've even got a card like Storm. If you close off the lane with Storm or lock it down with Professor X, your opponent may not be able to put more cards there to disable the -4 power. So that can really help secure that negative power for your opponent. To get into the good and the bad for White Widow, let's start by looking at the good. First up, she has a good floor, and I'm going to go into depth on this later. She is a safe junk or clog card. I'm also going to talk more about this, but it's just safe. I mean, even if your opponent fills their side, she's still a 2/2, right? If your opponent's board is full, it's never adding this Widow's Kiss to your side of the board. It's not like when a green goblin gets stopped and you have that -3 stuck on your side, okay? You don't need a Nihilist to come bail you out. She does counter some cards. I mean, if your opponent is playing Angela, which was somewhat recently buffed, you know, that fills up a spot on their location. Okay, Clog can just really annoy and piss off some decks. Okay, obviously if they're trying to play Galactus, you can stuff a Widow's Kiss there and prevent that as well. Junk decks do not currently have a go-to 2-cost card. Black Widow used to cost 2. She used to be a 2/1. Then they moved her to costing 3. And so White Widow might simply just be filling a hole in the Clog or Junk archetypes curve simply by costing 2. And then she is flexible because she doesn't get stuck on your side if your opponent's side is full. You know, she may just be good even outside of Junk and even outside of decks she synergizes with. She might just be a nice 2/2 that annoys your opponent. Now to talk about the downsides of White Widow, first up, she does get countered by stuff that counters Junk decks already. You know, if your opponent is playing Destroy, they can get rid of the Widow's Kiss or even eat it up with Carnage, in which case it helps them power up. If your opponent's playing Junk or Nihilist decks, they can send that Widow's Kiss back over to you. Okay, so that's going to be kind of hard to deal with. They can also just turn it off with Enchantress because it is an ongoing ability. It may be easy just for a lot of decks to negate the -4 power. Okay, if your opponent has a deck where they play a lot of cards on board already, they're going to fill up that location pretty easily. They don't need to fill it up right away. They just need to fill it up by turn 6. And so they can probably turn off that power unless they're playing like a really slow deck, something that's just doing like 1 card per turn, like a ramp list. It doesn't help with Galactus or Nihilist directly. So a lot of Clog decks right now are running Galactus and a Nihilist, okay, or at least a Nihilist. And White Widow does not help Galactus because you have her on your side of the board. You're giving your opponent a Widow's Kiss, but your side still is the 2/2 White Widow, so you cannot play Galactus there because you have a different card there. So they kind of have anti-synergy, they don't really work together. But with Annihilus, you could play them alongside each other. Annihilus isn't helping White Widow though specifically, okay? They do similar things, but he's not helping you get the Widow's Kiss over there, okay? She doesn't make Annihilus better in that sense. And depending on what your opponent's playing, White Widow might be bad on turn 6. If your opponent fills up their board and you play White Widow, she's just a 2/2, okay? So she really is best right on curve, right on turn 2, but if you do not draw her in time, then she's kind of just 2 power, on the final turn, unless your opponent actually has open space, in which case she might be really good on turn 5 or 6 if they just have space and they don't know you're about to play White Widow. So to talk about the floor and the ceiling for White Widow, this is White Widow at her realistic worst and realistic best, okay? First up, the floor is that she just does nothing. As I mentioned, maybe your opponent's side of that location is just full, or they can easily destroy the card or negate its ongoing and the clog doesn't matter to them, in which case White Widow is a 2/2. A 2/2 is okay, it's a bit above the line of being viable, but it's not competitive, right? You'd never choose to do that, but this is very good for clog, right? I talked about Green Goblin. If Green Goblin can't get sent over to your opponent's side, that's -3 on your side. Hobgoblin is -8 on your side. You need something like Annihilus to bail you out in that situation. If White Widow doesn't pop off, you just have 2 power on your side of the board. So her floor for a card that fits in the clog or junk archetype is actually very good, okay? It's very impressive in that sense. Her ceiling is that she's giving your opponent a -4 power Widow's Kiss on their side of the board, and they're not able to negate the -4 power, they're not able to fill that location, in which case she's effectively a 2-cost 6 power card that is still causing some disruption, right? You may still be annoying them with that Widow's Kiss you put on their side. I don't know if that's overpowered. I mean, a 2/6, it's right on the border of being overpowered, right? I mean, a 2/6 isn't crazy. Angela can get bigger than that. Some decks may just not care, okay? They may not care. They may treat it as a 2/6, and you adding that -4 power didn't bother them too much, okay? So she doesn't have the craziest ceiling, but it's a good ceiling. It's pretty strong. In terms of where her average is, where I think she'll most likely be, I think she will usually give your opponent a -0 power Widow's Kiss. Okay, I think in most cases, again, it depends a bit on what deck your opponent's playing. I think in most cases, your opponent will be able to fill that location and negate the -4 power, but I think that's still good for you. Okay, you're still causing disruption. You're still adding this card to your opponent's side of the board that's forcing them to play cards there. So the first deck I've put together for White Widow is a nice, good old-fashioned junk or clog deck. This is my Snap and Crap. I took out Quake and I put in White Widow, a 2-cost card for a 2-cost card. I do have Goliath in here still. He still works in this deck just well, I think. And this is just even better now because the whole point of this deck, it's not a Galactus deck, so I don't have to worry about that anti-synergy with White Widow. This deck is focused on putting crap on your opponent's side of the board and snapping on them in the process. So you do the Hood turn 1 or Nebula, whichever you prefer. Turn 2, Daredevil or White Widow. If you do White Widow, you add a rock to their side of the board. Turn 3, you follow that up with Debris to add even more rocks. And then you can go into like Sentry Annihilus, or you could do Daredevil plus, the Hood, whatever, on turn 4. And then turn 5, fill up a location with Hobgoblin or Annihilus then. I mean, this just makes the clog deck even better. And again, White Widow is a nice, safe choice. If she doesn't work out well, that's fine. You're still getting 2 power with no downside. Next, I've got White Widow in a Cerebro 2 deck because why not? She's 2 power. She could effectively be 6 power, but either way, only 2 of that is on your side of the board, so she works perfectly in Cerebro. And she does synergize with Goose and with Stormy, even with Negasonic Teenage Warhead, okay? But with Goose, if you put a Widow's Kiss there and you play Goose there before or after, your opponent may have a tough time filling the location if they don't have many cheap cards. It's telling you where your opponent might want to play, so you could line up Negasonic Teenage Warhead there to destroy what they play, and then you can obviously do Storm. If you play White Widow in, say, the left lane, You could storm the left lane to prevent them from playing there, or you can even storm a different lane, so your opponent now has to choose, do they play on Widow's Kiss on turn 4, or do they play on Storm's Flooding Location turn 4, right? You're kind of really forcing their hand and making them choose. And last up, I've got White Widow in this Guardian's Location Control deck. We are running even more with the Nebula and Storm synergy here. We're even adding in Jean Grey, and we've got a card like War Machine and Sandman. So the whole point of this deck is to really make it tough for your opponent to decide where they play their cards. Okay, you could Nebula the left lane, you could White Widow the middle lane, and you could Storm or Jean Grey the right lane. Okay, your opponent wants to play on all locations every turn, but they just can't, so they're going to be letting Nebula power up or preventing Widow's Kiss from powering down, or they're stuck playing on Jean Grey, or trying to get into the flooded location. You've got War Machine in there, so you can play on the flood location or not play on Jean Grey, and you got Sandman, so your opponent can only pick one lane on the final turn because they can only play one card. So I think this deck actually has some real strength to it. It's never been the strongest, Jean Grey, but the more cards you get that work, just the better she gets. And you're not used to playing around these decks because they've never been too popular. So when it does happen, it is pretty annoying, and I think this deck's got real potential. So to give my ratings on this Spotlight Cash Week for April 20th to the 30th, in terms of token value, it's good. This is the standard we've been seeing. All the new cards have been coming out as Series 5, and they pair them with a single Series 4 card and another Series 5 card. So good token value there. In terms of being competitive, I think it's okay. I think Nico Minoru is very good. She's one of the best one-cost cards. Snowguard is alright. She's kind of good. But they're both supporting cards, okay? So if you're newer to Pool 3, you don't have many Series 3, 4, or 5 cards, even if you do get Nico or Snowguard, you may not be able to make great use out of them yet. So it's not good in that sense, okay? It's not like you're getting, High Evolutionary or Thanos or something that just carries an archetype. You're getting some nice supporting cards, which may or may not benefit you depending on which archetype you play. In terms of variants, I think they're okay. I've seen a lot of people saying they're going to be chasing after this Peach Momoko Nico Minoru variant, so I think that one's very good. I think the Snowguard one, it's the Max Grex Snowguard. It's okay, it's not bad, but I don't like how the Snowguard tokens don't get their own art. I really wish they would start giving more cards with tokens, some unique art as well. So I'm kind of still waiting on that for Snowguard, and I don't think she's the most kind of interesting character. And in terms of White Widow, I think the variant's okay, nothing crazy. Nico, I think, is the best variant here, so if you do really like that one, it may be worth chasing after. And for my final ratings on White Widow herself, in terms of being fun, this is really interesting. Okay, I'm doing red stars here instead of yellow because I think her fun is okay. She's not doing crazy stuff, but she is forcing your opponent to do something. She's going to be in interesting decks, and you can maybe elevate some interesting combos like her synergy with Jean Grey, but it's going to become very annoying very fast. Okay, people do not like Clog, right? If you look at the cards that the community complains about, it's cards that just get rid of your other locations like Galactus, or it's cards that play your own cards but better like Leader, Old Leader, or Loki, or it's stuff that puts crap on your side of the board. Okay, people do get annoyed by the Sentry and Nihilist combo. Okay, people get annoyed by Galactus when they're also adding goblins to your side. White Widow, if she is really good and she just becomes somewhat relevant in the meta, people are going to be annoyed and people are going to start complaining very quickly. Okay, so that's good and bad for fun. It might be a little fun for a while and then just become really annoying. In terms of being flexible, I think she's okay. I don't think she needs a Clog deck. She's obviously best there or in location control style decks like I showed, but you could put her in other stuff. At worst, she's just a 2/2 that kind of bugs your opponent. In terms of being competitive, I think she's good. When I originally did my season preview, I had her as okay, but over time, I've realized that she's pretty good. Again, she just automatically fills the 2-cost spot for junk decks, which is awesome. But even for the location control, just synergizing with Storm alone, you could just put White Widow, Storm, and Nebula in like any deck, right? It can be this own little kind of small combo package that will just work. I don't know if she's going to be amazing because her ceiling isn't that high. Again, at best, she's a 2/6 effective stats. 2/6, that's not overpowered sounding, okay? It's just adding 1 card to your opponent's side of the board. If you really want to get max use out of her, you do want to synergize her maybe with some other junk cards. So I don't think she's amazing, but I think she's really strong. I think she is better than Baron Zemo. She will be better than Baron Zemo, and likely better than Valentina, who comes out the following week. We'll see if she's better than Red Hulk or Red Guardian, though. But my thoughts on White Widow are pick her up, okay? Maybe, skip her if you're not excited for the spotlights, or if you do not play junk decks at all, or these, location lockdown type decks at all. But if you do like those decks somewhat, I think she fits right in. She's super easy to play, nice, flexible 2-cost card, and she's going to be a little bit of fun until she becomes annoying. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think of White Widow. Let me know how good you think she'll be and what combos you think she will work best with. So until then, stay positive. I'll see you next time.